Just 2 months after the election, the ITA, the International Testing Agency, has published a report with heavy accusation against the newly elected president, Dr. Hasan Akkush, concerning events happened during the period which he was the president of the Turkish Weightlifting Federation. Akkush has self-suspended himself from the assignment, and the first vice president, Maxim Agapitov, became the interim president. During the last periods, we have assisted an unprecedented crisis, bringing the current executive board almost to collapse, as Agapitov has proved he is not competent to lead and manage the EWF. In order to reestablish a legal leadership, at the end of August, I promoted the collection of signatures by the members of the Federation in order to call an extraordinary Congress to elect a new president. On 30 August, the membership exceeded the minimum number required by the EWF Constitution. After a series of verification by the EWF General Secretary, in order to guarantee the full constitutionally and legally of the actions, the Extraordinary Congress has been called from 18 December 2021. Certainly, the issues could be avoided. It would have been sufficient that the other federations had believed more in me when, during the electoral campaign before Moscow, I illustrated the involvement of some people in the last IWF scandal, and announcing the consequence that could happen if the election had given the result that at the end have given. Politically speaking, the European situation is not the best, as we can notice a division in few groups. And it's not good. It should be said that Europe has never been very united, but today it's even more divided. This condition is not good from its political influence from a global view, where we can see other 4 continents more united than us. At the moment, the situation which the IOC is carefully under control. The adoption of the new constitution, which resolves some critical issues raised by the IOC, has made us time, but is not finished yet. The last decisive test will be the next election, where the IOC expects to see new face leading the IWF. No need to forget that the IOC is not only looking at the IWF leadership itself, but as already mentioned in some statements, they also carefully observe the evolution in the continental areas. So, also the next EWF presidential election will be evaluated by the IOC. If we make a small historical reconstruction, the McLaren report and the consequent investigation made by the ITA, we can see that they have revealed new issues, but we must remember that for more than 10 years, the colleague Dr. Antonio Urso had already shown good part of the problems itself. The McLaren report, in addition to discovering other serious violations, has also confirmed what declared several times by Urso. Regarding the IT investigation, I would like to ensure all the persons involved that the investigation are not concluded. The report submitted a few months ago is the first, but not the last. And we do not forget that not only ITA is investigating, but also the VADA, Intelligence Investigation Department, together with the law enforcers of several countries, are continuing with the investigation. How to prevent it from happening? The IOC request as a new phase to lead the IWF and new constitution are a fundamental part of the solution. I would like to add that maximum transparency in all the activities of the executive board and the preservation of some sensitive sector to independent structures, like the case of anti-doping, was entrusted to the ITA. It will be a disaster. Losing the status of Olympic discipline will start a chain reaction that will destroy our discipline. The first and most heavy consequence will have to face all the national federations that will see drastically reduce the funds, and how it's easy to imagine who will suffer the worst damage: all our athletes. Here we reconnect partially to the analysis made about the general political situation. Certainly, there will be political strategies that will influence the choice in the EWF election as to be useful in those of the IWF. There is also a small unknown aspect that never need to underestimate. I refer to the candidate figure that cannot give a certain of the final outcome. A small introduction we need to be made, because a good part of the new terms is already flied away with the postponement of the election due to the pandemic crisis and with the problem appeared after the last election, as we already said. The new president will have just over 2 years to implement his program. It is certainly not a long time, as every reform needs some settlement time before showing its result. As regarding me, I will propose the same program presented for Moscow with some small adjustment. The main goal I want to achieve are the first, raise the popularity of our sport. Without its component, we are not interesting commercially speaking, and consequently it is more difficult to attract business partners fundamental for the development of any sport discipline. Another mandatory target will be to draw up as soon as possible a new constitution in the path of the one adopted by the IWF, considering also that the current version has shown some gaps to manage some subjects like the management of crises occurred in the last months. The creation of the EWF TV. In the actual digital era, the classic concept of TV is already obsolete. In addition to preserve our followers, we must enjoy young people, also with the purpose of finding new athletes. Young people like to have everything at hand through their smartphone, tablet, laptop, or smart TV. Obviously, it will be not a platform addressed only for young people. Now all of us are using everyday devices anywhere to obtain information or to follow what is in our interest. The EWF-TV will offer access at hand to all users who want to follow our discipline. The basic idea is not a simple YouTube channel, but progressively developing our own streaming multi-platform where we can share not only the EWF main activities, but also the principal activity of all federation members. It's easy to imagine how many developments a platform like this one could have, and combined with a good marketing strategy will bring additional economic revenues that can be reinvested in development and support programs of the member federation. I will send my more detailed program soon to all the EWF Federation. Finally, I want to ensure that I'm not intentional to upset the EWF only with innovation. For sure, it's my intention to preserve the good things introduced by predecessor leaders, as, for example, to restart the publication of the EWF scientific magazine, launched and promoted by the EWF honorary president Dr. Urso, unique in this sector at world level for technical and details offered. Maintain the remuneration granted to the technical officials involved to the European competition promoted by the outgoing EWF president Dr. Akush.